Welcome, listeners, to another episode of History of the Popes, where we journey through the lives and legacies of the men who've shaped the Catholic Church from the chair of Peter. Today we're diving into the story of Pope Innocent XII, a figure of quiet resolve whose reforms cut through the excesses of his time like a blade of moral clarity. Born Antonio Pignatelli in the shadow of Naples nobility, his path to the papacy was one of diplomacy, devotion, and an unwavering commitment to the Church's evangelical roots. So settle in as we explore a pontificate that redefined papal service in an age of intrigue and ambition. In the grand tapestry of the Catholic Church's history, where the papacy has served as both spiritual beacon and temporal power, few figures emerge with the quiet resolve of Antonio Pignatelli, who ascended to the chair of Peter as Innocent XII. Born in 1615 amid the sun-baked hills of Spinazzola in the Kingdom of Naples, Pignatelli entered a world still echoing the echoes of the Counter-Reformation, a Europe rent by confessional strife and the ambitions of absolute monarchs. His family, noble and devout, traced roots to the ancient Pignatelli line, intertwined with the fortunes of southern Italy. Yet, from his earliest days, young Antonio seemed destined not for the clamour of courts, but for the contemplative service of the Church, a path that would lead him through decades of diplomatic subtlety and ecclesiastical duty to a pontificate marked by moral rigour and reformist zeal. Educated at the Jesuit Collegio Romano in Rome, that venerable forge of clerical minds, Pignatelli imbibed the humanistic learning and spiritual discipline that defined the post-Tridentine era. The Jesuits, with their emphasis on eloquence, piety, and adaptability, left an indelible mark on him. One senses in his later career the Ignatian ideal of finding God in all things, even in the labyrinthine politics of the Curia. Upon completing his studies, he entered the Roman Curia under Pope Urban VIII, that Barberini pontiff whose nepotism would later haunt the Church, like a cautionary spectre. Pignatelli's ascent was steady, unflashy. Governor of Viterbo, where he navigated local feuds with pastoral tact. Nuncio to Tuscany, mediating between grand ducal pretensions and papal prerogatives. By 1660 he was dispatched to Poland, that vast commonwealth teetering on the edge of the Ottoman shadow, where he fostered alliances against the Turk while soothing the wounds of religious division among Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants. From Warsaw he moved to Vienna in 1668, serving as nuncio to the Habsburg court amid the thunder of the Holy League's campaigns. Here, in the glittering halls of Leopold I's empire, Pignatelli honed his diplomatic finesse, qualities essential in an age when the papacy balanced the scales between Bourbon France and Habsburg Austria, each vying for dominance in Christendom. Yet a shadow fell. Under Pope Clement X, he was exiled, as it were, to the bishopric of Lecce in his native Naples, a post that might have broken a lesser spirit. But Pignatelli, ever the patient servant, used these years to deepen his episcopal ministry, tending to his flock with a father's care. Recalled to Rome in 1673, he rose swiftly under Innocent XI, that austere reformer whose beatification would come centuries later, as secretary of the Congregation for Bishops and Regulars, and then Maestro di Camera. In 1681, Innocent XI elevated him to the cardinalate, assigning him the titular church of San Pancrazio, fuori le mura, and later transferring him to Faenza, and, in 1687, to the Archbishopric of Naples. These were not mere honours. They were apprenticeships in the governance of souls, preparing him for the burdens of the tiara. The death of Alexander VIII in February 1691 plunged the College of Cardinals into conclave, a ritual as fraught with intrigue as any Renaissance drama. The Sacred College, swollen to 61 electors, divided along national lines. The French Zelanti, ever wary of Habsburg influence, clashed with the imperial party, while Spanish and Italian factions maneuvered for leverage. Weeks stretched into a standoff, the Sistine Chapel's frescoes bearing silent witness to whispered cabals and veto threats. Pignatelli, at 76, entered as a compromise figure, venerable, untainted by scandal, his Neapolitan roots a bridge between Spanish interests and Roman neutrality. On July 12th, after 5 ballots, he secured 53 votes, a mandate born of exhaustion and consensus. Proclaimed Innocent XII in homage to his patron, Innocent XI, he was crowned 3 days later, the tiara's weight settling upon a brow lined by wisdom rather than ambition. From the outset, Innocent XII's pontificate breathed the air of moral renewal, a deliberate counterpoint to the nepotistic excesses that had plagued the See of Peter since the Avignon exile. Alexander VIII's brief reign had seen the resurgence of family favoritism, with estates and offices lavished upon kin in a manner that evoked the scandalous Borgia or Medici courts. Innocent, drawing on the reformist legacy of his namesake, acted with swift decisiveness. On June 22, 1692, he promulgated the Bull Romanum Decet Pontificum, a document of crystalline intent sworn to by the cardinals themselves. It abolished the office of cardinal nephew outright, that pernicious custom codified under Pius V in 1566, but rooted in medieval power plays. No longer could a pope confer the purple on more than one relative, and only if that kinsman proved otherwise suitable by merit alone. Revenues, estates, and curial posts were barred to family. The papal purse, once a familial fount, was sealed against such abuse. "The poor are my nephews," Innocent declared, redirecting the church's largesse to the indigent. In this, he echoed the evangelical simplicity of the gospel, transforming nepotism's gilded chains into acts of charity, a reform not merely administrative but profoundly theological, reminding the faithful that the church's bridegroom was Christ, not Caesar's kin. This anti-nepotic decree was no isolated fiat, but part of a broader curial purification. Innocent curbed simony in the apostolic chamber, streamlining its finances with an economist's eye and a pastor's heart. He curtailed the sale of offices, that venal marketplace which had eroded clerical morale since the investiture controversy. His court, once a nexus of Baroque splendor, adopted a frugality that scandalized the Roman aristocracy. Fewer banquets, simpler vestments, a deliberate austerity that harkened back to the mendicant popes of the High Middle Ages. Yet this was no puritanical severity. Innocent's piety was warm, incarnational. He completed the Curia Innocentiana, that grand judicial palace on the Quirinal, now housing Italy's Chamber of Deputies, an ironic legacy, for in its halls he envisioned justice tempered by mercy, and in a gesture of profound humanity, he converted portions of the Lateran Palace into refugees for the unemployed and the infirm, opening the apostolic apartments to those the world had cast aside. Charitable foundations proliferated under his aegis, hospices for orphans, schools for the destitute, institutions that embodied the Church's preferential option for the poor, long before that phrase entered modern lexicon. In canonizations, Innocent's pontificate flowered with saints' lives, affirming the Church's hagiographic tradition as a school of virtue. He raised to the altars Zita of Lucca, that humble maidservant whose daily bread-breaking for the poor evoked the corporal works of mercy. These acts were not ceremonial flourishes, but ecclesial pedagogy, reminding a baroquely ornate age of Christianity's ascetic core. As the 17th century waned, Innocent's health, frail since youth, ebbed like the Tiber at dusk. Gout and stone plagued him, confining the octogenarian to his bed in the Quirinal's shadowed chambers. He who had walked Warsaw's halls and Vienna's corridors now processed in spirit alone, dictating bulls from a litter strewn with parchments. On September 27, 1700, surrounded by cardinals and confessors, he yielded his soul, aged 85. His last words a plea for the poor's succor. His tomb, crafted by Filippo della Valle in St. Peter's, captures the pontiff in repose, tiara askew, a shepherd's crook in hand, art mirroring life. Innocent XII's legacy, viewed through the long lens of church history, resides in his reformist ethos, a pontificate that pruned the vine of nepotism, allowing fresher shoots of merit to flourish. He stands as a hinge figure, bridging the absolutist 17th century and the Enlightenment's dawns, embodying the papacy's vocation to transcend kin and crown for the sake of the gospel. In an era of Louis XIV's Versailles and Leopold's battlefields, he recalled the Petrine office to its evangelical roots. Service, not dominion. Charity, not cabal. One thinks of him in Robert Browning's The Ring and the Book, where he narrates justice's poetry amid a Roman murder's prose, his voice a moral compass in narrative chaos. For us today, amid our own scandals and secular drifts, Innocent whispers, the Church renews not by power's grasp, but by poverty's embrace. In his life, we glimpse the quiet revolution of holiness, ever the papacy's truest chronicle. And that brings us to the close of our episode on Pope Innocent XII, a pontiff whose legacy of reform and charity continues to resonate through the centuries. His life reminds us that true leadership in the Church lies not in grandeur, but in the humble service of the Gospel's call. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the papacy, check out our other episodes, and we'll see you next time on History of the Popes. Until then, keep exploring the past to understand the present.